This is Extra Rounds. Extra Rounds.
Well, it is April 5th, which is National Deep Dish Pizza Day. And here on Extra Rounds, we like a good pizza. The extra cheese to my pepperoni is Dean Thomas. I didn't mean to say that about your sense of humor or anything. That wasn't a shot there. I think the cheese is the best part of a pizza, personally. But, Dean, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. And I can appreciate the metaphor and the simile that you tried to throw at me. I can appreciate that. But, yeah, man, I'm feeling good, man. I'm still at the Apex. Ain't nobody here. Everybody went home except the security guy, and I am still at the Apex.
So, wait, are you making the security guy stay longer? Is that what we're doing right now?
No, these guys be here.
Oh, they're there all the time.
All the time.
That's like Area 51 over there.
It is. It's like Area 51. Like, you can't just run up in here thinking you're going to get some workout.
Right, no.
No, you can't just run up in here and just start running around in the cage. They got security here 24/7.
Well, when they fire me from Extra Rounds, I'm hoping I can get that overnight watch position at like 3 a.m. at the Apex.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I think you fit for that type of job, just sitting here watching TV.
I mean, that's what radio was, back in the day. You just sit there and watch TV.
Around waiting for the song to end.
Yeah, 100%. Like we go play wiffle ball during the really long songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing Rapper's Delight because it's like 10 minutes long.
I mean, I worked at a rock station, so it was more like Stairway to Heaven.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
But I digress. We are here on another episode of Extra Rounds. There's a lot going on in the world of mixed martial arts. The UFC is gearing up for UFC 300. That is next week. We've got a card coming up this weekend. Last weekend, the Octagon touchdown in Atlantic City. Were you out there at AC?
I was not. I was out here, actually, still here in Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you, hopped a flight to Austin the other day to go hang out with Joe Rogan.
Oh, well, me and Matt Serra and John Rollo was hanging out with Joe Rogan yesterday. Then we went over to the Comedy Mothership. I was going to do a quick set, but then I said, you know what? I don't want to show nobody up. So I ain't want them to get self-conscious because, it's hard to follow me.
I'm not kidding you. 15 years ago, I did this radio show, and I had Joe Rogan on it, and I told him he should do a podcast, and he told me absolutely not. He said the reason he didn't want to do it is because every comedian wants to be a radio guy, and every radio guy wants to be a comedian, and now look at him.
Look at him. Hottest podcast in the world.
I know. And that's the other thing, too. You can literally look at him. I wish radio never changed. I thought, I built this whole look, Dean, knowing I had a face for radio, and now this is just television. It's terrible.
I know. Now it's just television. Hopefully it doesn't ruin the ratings.
That's all right. It's all right. We show enough clips of other athletes and stuff. Well, athletes, not other athletes. I'm not trying to say I'm an athlete. You are an athlete. But, again, let's get back to it. Atlantic City, New Jersey, a frequent stomping ground for the early days of the Zuffa era for the Octagon. It's been a while since they've been back out there, and let's talk about what we saw. Manon Fiorot able to get the win over Aaron Blanchfield, a very decisive win, Dean. Basically a shutout, and for my money, this is really the first time that Aaron Blanchfield has ever lost. Yes, it is the second loss of her career, but the first time I thought she did enough against Tracy Cortez inside the Invicta cage to get her hand raised. The judges didn't feel that same way, but this one was a no-doubter. I mean, you can't make an argument that Aaron Blanchfield won this fight. Your thoughts on the performance turned in by Fiorot and also the performance turned in by Aaron Blanchfield?
And I'm not one to hate on anybody, and I don't want to come across as negative here, but I am just not a fan of the fighting style of Manon Fiorot. And it's because she has the physicality and the tools and all the things to be so dominant inside the octagon, but she's just not dominant. She's just doing enough to win. And the reason why is because, I don't know the reason why she's doing that.
Right.
But it just comes across as underperforming to me. Because when you have the tools that she has, she should be putting these other females away. I mean, she's bigger, she's faster, she's longer, she's a striker. But what she does is she touches, moves, makes it really difficult for you, gets you to make mistakes, get you out of position and touch you again, get you out of position and grabs you, throws you off. And I sort of feel like if you do jiu-jitsu, it's almost like going with that wrestler who doesn't really know jiu-jitsu,
Right.
but he just comes in and roughs everybody up.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, man, I can't do nothing with this guy. Because if you look at the way Erin Blanchfield approached the fight, like after she realized it was like, man, I can't get to her, she started to get desperate and started to really just run at her and make a lot of mistakes. And that's really what it was, is that Manon Fiorot frustrated her so much to get her out of position to make her make mistakes. And Erin Blanchfield was so far away from her system that she couldn't fight. And that's a really good skill that Manon Fiorot had to get Erin Blanchfield out of her system. Like that takes something to do. Like to do that, to get Erin Blanchfield to fight a different way takes something.
Yeah.
But once you get them out of their system, now it's time to turn it on. Now it's time to show dominance. And Manon Fiorot just doesn't do that. And for me, I don't like to see that. I don't like to see fighters underperform. And that's why I said I'm always hard on fighters when I know that they're capable of much more. And when you see the tools that she has, you know that she's capable of much more. And she doesn't give it. And to me, I think that's sad.
Yeah, I mean, you know this better than anybody. This is a sport where, yes, it's about winning. Winning does solve everything. At the end of the day, if you win every fight, you're going to be able to make the argument that you're the best fighter in the world. But I say make the argument because it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to recognize you as such. You have to have some flair. You have to have some style. You have to have dominance in a way that isn't just you won all the scorecards. If you are clearly out in front of everyone, you need to be able to at least flirt with the idea of putting them away or taking a 10-8 round or, just inserting your dominance in a way where people were like, okay, I still need to see this fight in rounds 4 and 5 after 15 minutes of dominance where, all right, this clearly looks like this is going to the cards. And I get it. So for Fiorot, like, did you feel like this was a win as far as the overall goal of progressing up the ranks? I mean, she beat a very great contender.
I'll say this, is that when she first came to the UFC, I didn't think that she was that great of a fighter. I thought that she had all the tools like she does now, but what she lacked was maturity and patience. And I thought that when she fought at the highest level, her lack of maturity and patience was going to get the best of her, because I thought that it would catch up and she would start getting tired and start making mistakes as the fight progressed. But she showed within this fight and then the fight with Rose is that she knows how to pace herself and that she can fight at her own pace. Because when she has those tools, when you're faster than everybody, you have to fight at your own pace. And she showed that she can bring it to her level. She can bring it down to her level or any level that she wants to fight at and fight at that pace. And I think that it's going to be very difficult for everybody else in the division to keep up with her, just for that reason. I don't see even the champ, Alexa Grasso, is going to have a hard time, but she's going to struggle with somebody like Manon Fiorot because she just makes it so difficult to fight any other way. And it's going to be hard. There's one name in the division, and she's not even, I think she's ranked 7 right now, that I think will give Manon Fiorot problems fighting at that pace.
Who's that?
Natalia Silva.
All right.
I think Natalia Silva, just from a stylistic perspective, will force Manon Fiorot to fight a different fight, and she might struggle with that. But other than that, I can't see anybody else. Even the former champ Valentina, I think even Valentina will struggle with the range and just those difficult things that Manon Fiorot presents. It's a very difficult style to fight, and I'm not a fan of it. Even though she's winning, I am not a fan of it. Now, to add some context to this, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the old school style of wrestler who would just take you down and hold you and win rounds by doing that. Because that's essentially what it kind of is to me. She's just doing enough, but still not doing what she needs to do in order to, like, win the fight. She's just doing enough to not lose and not let the other person win.
So it's the modern day lay and pray, if you will.
It's the modern day. It's 100% the modern day lay and pray.
let's talk about Erin Blanchfield. I mean, 24 years old. Again, the first loss, in my opinion, of her career that she clearly lost. I mean, her stock is going to fall here, Dean. But how much does it fall? Because I still believe that Erin Blanchfield has the capabilities if she can, as you say, get her system going. If you fight Erin Blanchfield's fight and you are forced to do so, generally a pretty tough night at the office. But, obviously we saw her sort of shut down. How far does her stock fall?
I mean, I think it's actually good for her because she's still so young. And when you fight a technician like Erin Blanchfield, things have to be perfect. Conditions have to be perfect for her. And she's been really good about bringing people into her perfect conditions. But what she realized was that there's other conditions. There was other T's that haven't been crossed and some I's that haven't been dotted, that the word was a little bit longer than she anticipated it to be. And now she's going to have to go back to the camp and go, all right, there's a couple of T's that I missed. And there are some I's that I missed. And there's some things that I'm going to have to work on. And it's more than just the striking aspect, because there was some holes in her striking even before. And I always say, what it cost you to not fix those things is what you could have had by having them. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that she never fixed some of them flaws in her striking, that's what it cost her. It cost her this win. It cost her this win. And there's some other things that maybe she could have done in terms of her wrestling that she may have lacked, in terms of fighting in the clinch that she may have lacked. So she'll go back, and I think she'll be a better fighter because of this. As long as she doesn't attribute this loss to she wasn't big enough and strong enough.
Right. Yeah.
She's going to have to attribute this to she lacked a couple of takedown opportunities. She lacked some clinch fighting, and some technical things in her striking is what she lacked. And she paid the price. The price that she paid was losing this fight. She'll go back and fix it.
You bring up the size and strength thing. I mean, even if you are an athletic person for a division, or a strong athlete for the division, you're not always going to be the better athlete. And especially as you get older in your career, Erin Blanchfield doesn't need to worry about being old by any means. But as any athlete progresses, deep into their 20s or 30s, late 30s, you're going to run into that, tough up and comer who's just going to out athlete you. So it comes down to tactics. It comes down to opportunities. And you were, go ahead.
Well, that's the weird thing about this game is that because there's not a lot of people who really understand the game itself, is that the easy and the lazy way to handle it, even though they think it's the harder way, the easy way to handle it is because if you're technically not proficient, if you're not proficient technically, the result is you get tired.
Right.
So what we see is a tired fighter out there. So the lazy way to handle this is to say, well, you just need to be in better shape. And that's the way people handle it. They go, you need to get in better shape so that you don't get tired. But the reality is that's not the problem. The problem is you are technically deficient. And that's the one thing that people don't understand. And the reason why people don't understand that is because there's not a lot of true technicians in the game. Because people solve their problems by going, I need to do an extra day of strength and conditioning. But that's not the problem. That's only going to allow you to be worse for longer.
Right.
You can suck a little bit longer.
Yeah. I mean, this is the only sport in the world I know, Dean, where you can be a one-trick pony as long as that is one hell of a trick you got. If you beat everybody with that one trick, you don't really have to change anything. You just got to win with it every time.
Well, it's because in this game, we're allowed to have 100-point plays.
It's true.
And if your one trick is a 100-point play, you can do that for as long as you're scoring that 100 points.
Right. Yeah.
And the other person can't catch up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I remember when Mirko Cro Cop guillotined somebody for the first time, and I was like, wait, he kicks everyone in the head. Cro Cop's got a guillotine choke. All right. That's another trick. That's good.
That's another trick. He's got another trick.
Another trick. Yeah.
And that's what I always tell people. Make sure you have a couple of tricks.
Yeah.
Because that'll end the fight.
It's true.
Like even Michael Chandler had that trick up his sleeve, that front kick. Probably never practiced it, but he's such a great athlete that when the opportunity arose, he was able to throw it, and bam, the trick worked.
I heard Steven Seagal taught him that. I'm kidding.
You know,
I'm kidding.
we talked about that yesterday on Joe Rogan about Steven Seagal and Anderson Silva, and I think Steven Seagal may go down in the history books and be a Hall of Famer in the UFC, just based on his teachings.
There you go. That's all you need. That's his one trick. He taught everybody everything.
That's it. It works.
Let's talk about Chris Weidman, who got back in the win column in a very sort of odd way. Technical decision. You don't see a lot of these in mixed martial arts. Bruno Silva poked in the eye. It was originally called a TKO stoppage for Weidman. Then they end up going to the scorecards. Buy or sell this, Dean Thomas? The controversy doesn't take anything away from the Weidman victory. Do you buy that?
No, it doesn't. I am buying that, and I'll tell you why. Because Chris looked pretty good, and I think that was what is important to note here in this whole fiasco, is that at the end of the day, Chris looked like he belonged inside the octagon. And I think that's what we are more concerned about, was that, you know, what he's been through, the all that stuff that he's been through, the surgeries, and just every time you see him, I get nervous every time he throws a kick.
Right.
He looked like a fighter, and he looked like he belonged there. And I think that's one thing that we can't miss here, and we can't forget that, is that was the important thing of this fight. Did he deserve to win this fight? I don't think so. I don't think. Only maybe, like, the thing is, his strategy was to really reach out and control that lead hand, and what he was doing was a foul.
Mm-hmm.
What he was doing was illegal, and he was having success because he was doing something illegal. And he poked the guy in the eye the first time. He poked the guy in the eye the second time. And the referee, and I've been really hard on Gary Copeland, but the referee made a grave mistake by saying, oh, well, you guys both poked each other, so I guess it cancels it out. No, it doesn't cancel it out.
Isn't there a saying like two wrongs don't make a right?
Right. And it was so weird that he was like, oh, you guys both poked each other. I was like, what are you doing? He still poked. I was like, and not only that, but then Chris continued the entire fight, reach out in that way. And the ref should have did something there and said, listen, dog, listen, I'm going to take a point if you don't. And I think that was the biggest issue. So, but I don't want to take anything away from Chris's performance, because he looked fantastic. He looked really good. He took some big shots. I didn't expect that from him. And the fact that he's walking away with this win, I don't know if it's going to stand. I won't be upset if it does stand, but he did put his fingers in that boy like a bowling ball. I ain't going to lie about that.
Yeah. I think you're right, though. I had a chance to talk to Ray Longo, which is going to be on the Bruce Buffer podcast later today. But Ray talked about the mental and the physical was there for Chris, and that's something that hasn't been there for, the last couple fights. And it's hard to maintain, the desire and hunger and be there both mentally and physically when you've gone through the things that Weidman has gone through. Not to mention, he's been to the top of the mountain. We've talked about this in the past. When you become a champion and you lose that belt, it's hard to be that hungry contender again, especially when you're later in age and you break your leg in half, you go through surgeries. I mean, the dude's been through all of it. It was nice to see him perform the way he did, but I was surprised that he was able to win a technical decision. I've called a couple of fights that have ended in a technical decision. Usually when the fight ends in a foul like that and the winning party would be the offender of the foul, you're up in the scorecards. I've always been told, or was under the understanding, that if you poke someone in the eye or kick them low and they can't continue and you go to the scorecards, the best you can hope for is a draw. You can't win the fight. But
yeah, that's, to me, I think it's going to get overturned, to be honest with you. I really do believe that it's rare that things get overturned, but I think something like this, there's already been a precedent set. I talked to my guy Eric McCracken. He's a lawyer who follows all this stuff, and he told me there has been a precedent set in the state of New Jersey from another fight where it was overturned because of a foul. And I think that because of that precedent has been set, I do think that this will get overturned. If it doesn't, I'm not going to be surprised because of the bias that we have towards Chris Weidman. But, it probably should be overturned because I mean, come on, man. It was
Right.
very clear what was going on in this. It was very clear.
I'm a firm believer that you just want to get the right answer at the end of the day.
Yeah,
right?
at the end of the day, we just want to do right by both parties. And
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that they're going to run it back or they even need to run it back. It wasn't like it was the most entertaining fight. But at the end of the day, my man should not go home with a loss.
Yeah.
Bruno Silva should not go home with a loss after being fouled. We have to stop making these victims even more of a victim after they've been fouled.
Right.
I mean,
you talk about those
these
100-point
are the
plays earlier. Didn't you talk about 100-point plays? Like one loss, that's not one loss in this sport. That's months that you get, sort of a setback when you lose a fight. And if you've lost a couple, we're talking about all of a sudden you no longer have a job. So I'm with you. It's not necessarily that this one loss maybe hurts Bruno Silva, where he can't recover, but it's a simple fact that maybe he goes on to lose 2 more fights. And now we're talking about...
Well, he's already lost a bunch of them.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But my argument is if he doesn't get cut off of this one, in 2 fights, 3 fights, if he comes up short, continues, we're not going to say, well, he shouldn't have lost that Weidman fight. We forget these things. We are short-term memory type of people. We're goldfish in 2024, and we're just going to look and see all that red in the fight finder and be like, well, that guy's got to go.
Yeah, so we see all that red. So, yeah, they got to do the right thing on this one and at least call it a no contest.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how the UFC handled it with the pay. I'm sure they already paid these guys out. I don't know how it's been handled with the bettors, but they should call this a no contest because Bruno Silva does not need to go home with a loss after being fouled.
Yeah, and as far as I know, the books aren't going to come back and try to take your money from you. I don't know if Weidman would have to return his win bonus necessarily, but I'm with you, Dean. Like I think you just want to get the right answer in the record book, and they can figure it out moving forward. But congrats to Weidman for looking as good as he did, and we'll see where he goes from here. This Saturday, back in Las Vegas, it's the UFC Fight Night card. We see Brendan Allen taking on Chris Curtis. It's a rematch. I kind of forgot that these guys had fought back in 2021. Chris Curtis got the TKO win over Allen. But Allen is actually the favorite in this rematch. He's won a bunch of fights. I think like 5 in a row, something like that, since these two last fought. Curtis has been on this sort of win one, lose one, win one, lose one trajectory. I'm curious, your thoughts on the fact that the guy who's coming into a rematch trying to avenge his loss is the underdog. What is your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you look at his body of work and what he's done over the last course of those 5 fights has been tremendous. I mean, he's submitted guys that he probably shouldn't have. I mean, I don't know if he was the favorite in some of them fights, but I mean, he came out, he beat up on Paul Craig, he beat up on Andre Muniz. I mean, Brandon Allen has been on a roll.
Yeah.
He's been looking really good. And even if you look at the fight with Chris Curtis the first time, he might have been the favorite in that fight and just got caught. So I think that when you look at their body of work and just where they're at in their careers, Brandon Allen should be the favorite in this fight. And I'm kind of giving him the edge as well. And I think the maturity and the humility that he probably gained after getting knocked out in the first fight from being a little bit cocky maybe. I think maybe he was a little cocky going in and got caught. And I think he's going to respect Curtis a little bit more in this fight and go, all right, I need to fight a little bit smarter. And I think the odds makers are taking that into account as well, is that he's matured since the first time. And I think he's going to fight this fight a little bit smarter and not allow himself to fight inside that boxing range and get in the pocket like that and get caught with a punch. I think that he's going to fight a little bit smarter. And if this does go to the ground, I think that we're going to see a big discrepancy.
Well, I mean, it's been nothing but a discrepancy with everyone on the floor with Brendan Allen as of late. We mentioned this nice 5-fight run that he's been on. I think 4 of those fights have ended by way of rear naked choke to his favor.
And Chris Curtis has done a good job of defending takedowns and keeping it on his feet. And he's a hard guy to take down because he's got such a low center mass and just low center of gravity. But I think that Brandon Allen's going to he might find a way to the back. And he's a finisher. He knows how to finish when he gets on your back.
Yeah. Chris Curtis has only been stopped twice in his 41-fight pro career. Most recently, he suffered a TKO loss in 2019. One submission loss that came all the way back in 2011. It was a rear naked choke. And for Brendan Allen, who Chris Curtis stopped in their last meeting, he's only been stopped 3 times in his career. One via Chris Curtis. The other was to Chris Curtis's teammate in Sean Strickland. So, we'll see what happens, but I don't know. I mean, I guess if there's going to be a stoppage, I favor Brendan Allen in getting it, but it is Chris Curtis that scored the stoppage in their previous meeting. All right, all roads lead to next week, Dean Thomas. UFC 300. It's what everyone's been talking about for months, and for good reason. It is a stacked card. What's the biggest storyline going into UFC 300 in your opinion?
You know what? I mean, there's so many storylines.
Yeah.
I think, but going into it, this is going to depend on who you ask, but the biggest storyline changed.
Okay, give it to me.
The biggest storyline before was, how dare you allow Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira be the main event? I think that was the biggest storyline.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I think we all warmed up to it. And I wasn't cold on it anyway.
Sure,
but I think most people warmed up to it.
You set the bar so high because it's UFC 300 that people were starting to throw out these ideas that were just absolutely crazy, Dean. Like crazy. Like, we're going to get prime, Chuck Liddell back. And it's like that's not how the real world works. You can't come up with craziness like that. So,
and that was the problem, that people made these expectations, and then Dana kind of was like, wait till you guys get, because I think Dana and them had something in mind that they wanted.
Sure. I
think they wanted something, but the fighters weren't cooperating. Like, you can't make guys fight. That's
right.
That is the one thing that we have to remember. You can't make guys fight. You just can't do it. If they don't want to fight, they're not going to fight.
That's the hardest part of that job, I would assume, is getting the personalities to mesh to go, okay, I'll sign for this fight on this day.
Right. And people don't understand is that when the UFC kind of put themselves in a hole when they were like, we're going to make the greatest fight ever. Because when they said that, now all the fighters knew they had leverage.
Right.
And they was like, oh, word?
Right.
John Jones was probably like, word?
Right.
I want $50 million.
Right. I want 2 Brinks trucks.
Yeah. And that was the problem, is that now that the fighters had leverage and was like, I'll just say no then. Because I'll just fight later at another time. But the UFC, they had Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira in their back pocket, right? And they were just, because now, and when I say they had them in their back pocket, they was like, all right, you know what? We'll just put them as the main event. And when you talk about both of those guys are dogs.
100%.
They're dogs before businessmen.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, and that's the reason why they took this fight, because Jamal Hill is a dog. Alex Pereira is a dog. And they took this fight because they wanted to fight, not because they were trying to make a business decision and hold it over to UFC and be like, all right, you want me to fight? I want all this money. They was like, you know what? I'll be glad to headline UFC 300. And I'm glad that they made this fight happen, because now looking back, these guys deserve it because they're dogs. And as a fighter, we want dogs to headline big cards like this. That's what we want. I don't want a businessman headlining my big cards. I want a dog in the driver's seat. And we got that in Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira.
100%. If anybody was upset or still trying to hold on to the idea that they're upset about this main event, ask them 5 seconds before these two touch gloves and start fighting. They're not going to be upset by it. It's going to be a phenomenal fight.
No one is going to be upset by it.
Yeah.
No one will be, because this fight's going to be fireworks, and I can guarantee you somebody getting knocked out.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, maybe this is an easier question. We talked about what the biggest storyline is. What is the storyline that is getting overlooked the most as we inch closer to UFC 300?
Honestly, I would overlook the most is easily Weili Zhang and Yao Shannon. Easily.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a great fight. That is an important fight for an entire division, the greatest division in female MMA right now. And that is getting overlooked because of Pereira and Hill, and then you got the BMF belt, and you kind of forget about Weili Zhang and Yao Shan'an. You really forget about that.
Not to mention, it's the biggest fight for an entire country.
Yes, it's the biggest fight for so
for like one of the biggest countries
in the world. People over there,
yeah,
right now, concerned about that fight than the rest of the world is concerned about the rest of the card.
Yeah, yeah, without question.
But we're not. But we don't really want to talk about it because of, the BMF.
Right. Of course. Of course. I hate to say it. The next topic for me is the BMF championship. Sure. It's a phenomenal fight. It's an all-timer type of fight. Both of these guys on short list for greatest of all time, whether it's divisional ranking, whether it's just entertainment. But I want to ask you this because we're kicking around this idea here in inside the Fight Pass team about what makes a BMF. And some of the people that were talking about it, they were just describing the greatest of all time list and not necessarily the BMF list. Like, for example, for me, Dean, I don't think George St. Pierre belongs on a BMF list because he's not a bad mother effer. He's a polite, kind, well put together, gentleman.
Listen, if you tap to strikes, you're not a BMF.
I mean, that's something entirely even different. People right now are like, wait, when did George St. Pierre tap to strikes? Matt Serra made him tap to strikes.
Matt Serra made him tap to strikes.
It's true. It's true.
He's not a BMF.
Yeah.
Now, George St. Pierre is not a BMF. He doesn't fit the criteria for BMF. A lot of fighters don't.
Right.
A lot of fighters don't. There are certain criteria that you have to fit, but you also have – so there's certain criteria that a lot of fighters will pass. Like when you look at a guy like Matt Brown. Matt Brown checks a lot of the boxes of being a BMF. He's just not good enough.
Right.
Right? But so you still have to be good enough. So there's a lot of things that are involved in that, in being a BMF, to be a BMF contender.
Yeah.
But you still have to be good enough.
Right. To me, Dean, like, I need to be nervous to be around you if you're a BMF. Like you might find yourself in some precarious situations. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm just saying that you might find yourself in some precarious situations. Like, if I'm going to go hang out with Jorge Masvidal, I might want to tell my wife and 2 other people where I'm going to be because I don't know what's going to happen that night.
Well, you know what another thing like what a BMF has to have is that other fighters don't talk trash to him.
Right. Yeah.
In face-offs.
100%.
Right? They got enough respect for him that they're just like, I respect this dude.
Yep.
You can look at some fighters and they be in their face and they be like, well, what you gonna do? You ain't never fought nobody like me. Yeah, what's up, what's up? But when you with a real BMF, you be like, we gonna scrap tomorrow.
Right.
That's what you say to him.
Yep.
You don't say you ain't never fought nobody like, you go, we gonna put on a show tomorrow. That's what you say. And that's really what it comes down to. Other fighters have to look at you in the way where they ain't willing to talk trash to you. They're willing to respect you enough to say, we're going to war tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't say that to George St. Pierre.
Absolutely not. You try to get into George St. Pierre's head.
You're like, man, you might outpoint me. You might be better than me. But you still, you know what I'm saying, I'll beat your ass in the street.
Right, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's actually a great point because, mixed martial arts is a game. We talked about that a little bit. It comes down to tactics. But if you're a BMF, like, that if this same fight were to happen outside, it's a completely different thing altogether.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of, and that's the thing too, and that's why I'm glad that we have the BMF, because most champions that are champion right now are not BMFs.
I don't know if you're supposed to be a BMF if you're the divisional champion.
You're not.
Yeah.
Like if you look at all the champions, they're not really BMFs. They're great fighters.
Right. Yeah.
Great. They're businessmen.
Right. I get that. I feel that.
The only like if Jamal Hill was still the champ, I would say he passes the test.
Right.
To be a BMF.
Right.
But other than that, like, they're all great businessmen, great fighters. They're the best. They're the best fighters, but they're not BMF material.
I feel that. And also, too, when you look at who's fighting for the BMF title here at UFC 300, Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway, Dean, like, don't get it wrong. I'm not saying that I don't care about this fight. I don't care who wins this fight because it doesn't
Exactly.
matter.
Exactly. And that's also what's entailed in being a bit like, you don't care who wins.
Nope.
You're like, we going to win
Right.
just by being able to watch them fight.
Yeah. I mean, they make it through weigh-ins, they make the walk, and they close the octagon door. Everybody won.
Yup. And that's one of the things that we don't worry about them, not making it to the cage. We don't worry about them, not performing up to task. We know what we going to get when they make the weight, and they going to make the weight. We know what we getting for the BMF. So, like, that's enough for me.
Yeah.
That's enough. And that's why I'm excited about this. And since they announced this fight, I was like, man, Gaethje might get him because, Gaethje's just, he's matured. His leg kick game is crazy. But, man, I always flip-flop every week. Every week I flip-flop. And right now I'm thinking Max Holloway might get him.
He might. You know what's interesting, too?
Right now.
We talk about this, too, about the divisional champions not necessarily being BMFs. I think with a win for either of these guys, they're in a championship mix. I think now that Volkanovski's no longer the champion at 45, like, it's interesting to see what Max would do, if he makes an argument to maybe get a fight with Topuria. Gaethje, I want to see Gaethje fight everybody. It doesn't matter. But, like, again, like, he might be, knocking on the door of a potential title fight again before too long. You never know.
Well, I think that's kind of a storyline with the whole BMF thing, too, is like, what do you do with the winner?
Yeah.
I mean, do you give the winner an opportunity to fight for the belt?
No one would be upset if the winner fought for the belt.
Yeah, no one would be upset. And, I mean, it's almost kind of a no-brainer if Gaethje wins because he probably should be fighting for the belt anyway.
Right.
So it's kind of a no-brainer if Gaethje wins. But what if Max wins?
Right.
Do you give him an opportunity? So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to kind of go through with this. I think if Max wins, they don't give him an opportunity. I think then it comes down to the winner of Sarukian and Charles Oliveira, which is also maybe an underrated storyline.
Yeah.
On this card.
Yeah, I mean, I completely forgot about that fight being on this card until you just said it right now. So yeah,
which is why I brought it up.
Do Bronx an underdog? For good reason. I think styles make fights. Stylistically, this might be a difficult fight for him. I think he is in a position where the up and comers might be in position to rightfully be the favorite. But I don't think, like, I'm not a betting guy, Dean, but I don't think I could ever bet against Charles Oliveira.
Well, that's the thing with him is that do Bronx excels when we don't expect him to.
It's true.
When he goes on a run and we expect a lot from him, he shows us who he used to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
He shows us who he used to be, and that's that kid coming up that wasn't afraid to tap.
Yep.
That had doubts in himself. He shows us that every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's supposed to lose, or when we think he's going to be that kid from before, he shows us what he's capable of.
Yep.
So that's why you can't really bet against him.
Nope.
Because everything on paper says Sarukian should win this fight. He's younger. He's stronger. He's a better wrestler. He's a better athlete. Not as dangerous, but he has all the tools to win the game of MMA. Because Sarukian is not a BMF material guy like Charles DuBronx is. Sarukian is a game player. Sarukian wins games. Sarukian should win this game against Charles Oliveira. But if Charles Oliveira goes out there and turns this to a fight and not a game, Charles Oliveira wins this fight.
And if you're a betting man, Charles Oliveira plus 190 underdog against Sarukian. So Sarukian minus 230. Biggest favorite on the card, Bo Nickel. He almost always is. The newly minted vegan Bo Nickel. I don't know if that means much to you. Yeah.
That means nothing to me, but good for Bo. Listen, I'm excited about Bo's career. I want to see what he's capable of. I heard so much about Bo even before he started fighting, about how good of a grappler he was.
Right.
Even before he got into fighting, he was just a wrestler and he was a good grappler, like even in jiu-jitsu standards.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how far he goes in his career. I just don't like his attitude sometimes.
He rubs people the wrong way, for sure, but sometimes that can be a moneymaker as well.
Yeah, but you know what? It's not. Here's what bothers me about him is that he's got what 5 fights, 6 fights,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, he doesn't have a lot of fights. Okay, that's cool. I don't care. Bring him up slow. Bring him up whatever pace you want.
Right.
But you're not allowed to talk about guys that didn't get brought up that way, that beat good fighters along the way. You're not allowed to be like, oh, Hamzat's not that good. You're not allowed to talk about the guys in the division that have fought the killers.
Right.
If you are being brought up slow and getting all these opportunities, you're not allowed to talk about the guys who came up the hard way. You gotta shut up and pay your respects because they came up the hard way. They didn't get a chance to fight Jamie Pickett.
Right. Yeah.
And Cody, and they're not fighting Cody Brundage, who's a good fighter,
Sure.
but he's just known to crack.
Well, I mean,
he's known to break.
Let's be honest, Dean. In the modern era, no one should be minus 2,100 on a UFC card.
Right.
You know?
And again, he's minus 2,100. And from what I hear, Cody Brundage is really good in the gym. Hard to keep down, very tough, but he's just known to crack. And that is perfect for a guy like Bo Nickel, who's a high-level performer in front of the big stage. And the stage alone is probably going to crack Cody Brundage.
Yeah. I mean, main card of the biggest UFC of all time.
Right. So I get it. I get it.
Right.
I get it. But listen, Bo, I know you're going to be a great fighter, but man, slow your roll when you talk about my boys, man, because my boys came up the hard way, man, broke with nothing. They didn't get all the luxuries. They didn't get all the goods. They didn't have a silver spoon like you got. So just take your silver spoon and run with it, man. I look forward to seeing your career, but you ain't allowed to talk about the big dogs.
He's young. He's making waves. We'll see. I mean, for those comments, a lot of people want to see him get humbled, and they'll pay for it. They'll pay to watch, and we'll see if anybody can make it happen. Last thing I want to hit on before we get out of here, Kayla Harrison makes her UFC debut. She takes on Holly Holm. Kayla minus 500, second biggest favorite on the card. Obviously, an Olympic medalist, a standout mixed martial artist. Before this UFC call came, though, Dean, I heard that she kind of had lost interest in fighting. Like she was, on the backside of her career mentally and was thinking about, just being done with the whole thing. Obviously, the UFC opportunity changes things, but have you worked with Kayla? Have you worked around her? And
I've worked around her. I know people that are very close to her, and she has a big heart. She's extremely intelligent, tremendous work ethic. I mean, just a really good role model and human being of a person. Just a really good human being. And I get why she might have wanted to stop. I mean, she's been through a lot. This is a young lady who's been through so much, been through a lot of adversity, deserves everything that she's getting at this point. Yeah, I have a lot of high hopes for her. The problem is 135.
Yeah, she's never fought it that way before. She took an Invicta fight at 145. The weight cut was tough. In that fight, we got to see her use elbows for the first time, and it was terrifying. When you allow her to take people down and elbow them in the face, she makes art on the canvas with her opponent's blood. So that was interesting to see. But 35, man, I mean, there's
I mean, that's
a fight within itself.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, but in terms of her character, you're not going to find many people in the world like her that have been through what she's been through, that has the amount of tenacity that she has. I mean, she's just tenacious and she's resilient, and there's no doubt in my mind that she's not going to make the weight. The only reason why she doesn't make the weight is if they tell her to stop cutting.
Right.
Is if like there's an issue like that, but she's going to make the weight. What I question is how well she's able to perform after she makes the weight.
Right.
Like, people don't understand that. Like, there's some, when you got to make weight like that, you take something out of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You take away from your performance.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. You take water out of your body and you try to put it back in, and it doesn't go back to all the places you took it out of. Your system just can't, reload and respond the way that you want it to when you take out a massive amount of water in a short period of time.
Now, I don't know if they're going to allow her to get an IV. I wouldn't doubt it if they were like, all right, she needs an IV.
I mean, here's my thing, Dean. I understand why they don't allow IVs, but I still think that the MMA world is a safer place when athletes are allowed to rehydrate that way. I understand there's a whole bunch of things regarding PEDs, and you can mask things easier when that's the case. But I wish there was some sort of solution in the middle where we could allow athletes to rehydrate that way, because it's the safest way to do it medically.
Well, and I get that too, but here's my thing too. Under the current structure that we have, if you absolutely have to rehydrate in order to perform the next day,
right,
then you're probably in the wrong weight class.
That's true.
Now, in Kayla Harrison's situation, it makes sense because, what is she going to do, fight at 145? They're not bringing her in to fight in the division that they got rid of.
Right. And,
so it makes sense that, all right, this is kind of a special exception. If she does rehydrate with an IV, I'm not going to be mad at that, because I just don't see her being able to perform at the level that she's capable of if she doesn't.
And she's there now. As a fan, what do you want? You want to see a compromised Kayla Harrison, or do you want to see Kayla Harrison? We all want to see Kayla Harrison.
Right. And her to be a minus 500 to me is disrespect to Holly. I think Holly presents more of a problem to Kayla than people are going to assume. Well, even without the weight cut, I think Holly would present more of a problem than that.
I mean, can we remember the fact that Holly Holm is the one who derailed Ronda Rousey, who was, a standout Olympian, just like Kayla Harrison. Kayla, a little bit different. I think that she's got more striking than Ronda does, but styles make fights, and it's still, at its core, a judoka versus one of the greatest strikers that combat sports has ever seen in a woman, in Holly Holm.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting fight. I'll tell you that now. This is one of the fights that I was looking forward to most on the card, just because of all that's at stake with this. And we've been looking forward to seeing Kayla Harrison for so long in the octagon. I mean, this is one of the things that we've always wanted to see, and now we get a chance to see it. And she's fighting somebody who's not going to be afraid of her, and that's important to note. That is important to note, is that Kayla Harrison has normally been fighting these women that are intimidated.
Right.
And don't have high-level competition experience.
They're also not her size, generally.
Right. Now she's fighting somebody who is going to be taller, just as big, just as strong, not intimidated, and also has high-level competition experience.
Yeah.
And also has been under these lights before.
It's true.
So this could get very interesting.
So if you were the odds maker, you're not making Kayla Harrison minus 500 is what you're saying?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I would be more willing to be, it would be like 180 in my opinion.
Okay. I mean,
minus
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. We'll see what happens. UFC 300 going down next week in Las Vegas. It's going to be a phenomenal week, phenomenal fight card. And I assume you're going to be there, Dean Thomas.
Oh, I'm working, brother. Come on, man.
Of course.
I done got the ascot ready, the jacket,
Man.
the silk, the hat. I was trying to wear a hat, but I don't know if Zach Candido will let me.
You're the only reason I even know what an ascot is. I'll be completely honest.
I brought him back. I might go with the bow tie though. You never know what I'm
really.
Gonna do.
I thought you would have like a custom made UFC 300 ascot.
Ooh, listen, man, I'm not Buffer.
I mean, he knows that. We know that. Mostly he knows that.
Yeah, he knows that.
But, you might need to get an Ascot sponsorship,
Listen, if the Ascot company out there want to hold it down for your boy, find me.
I mean, you could start your own company. We could call it You Bet Your Ascot.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm going to go copyright that right now.
Or Ascots for never mind.
Okay. Yeah, let's quit while we're ahead, Dean.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate you coming on the show as always. Appreciate you staying up late and keeping the security guy at the Apex company.
Keeping him company, man.
And I think you're a BMF.
Yeah. My man, TJ, thank you, man. Appreciate you.
The greatest night of fights ever assembled. That is what UFC 300 is going to be.
Are you kidding me with these prelims? You know it's going to be all action.
Any fight on the prelims of this card could be a main event. The best fight card ever assembled. People are never going to forget.
Live on UFC Fight Pass.
Well, of course, you got to keep it locked to UFC Fight Pass for all of your UFC 300 coverage. Action begins on Saturday with those early prelims. What a phenomenal card this is going to be. Solid stuff from top to bottom. The most stacked early prelim card I think you're ever going to see in mixed martial arts. Well, maybe until UFC 400. I don't even know when that would be, though. But yeah, UFC 300 next week in the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to be out there. We're going to be doing extra rounds on the ground. Bilal Muhammad going to be hanging out. Jason Anik, who everyone still thinks is John, despite the two not having hair. Well, Jason has hair. John doesn't. People just seem to think that John gets off the air, puts on a wig, and they still call Jason John over and over again. We'll be live inside T-Mobile Arena before and after the event. And if you're around, say hi. Say what's up. As always, you can get at me on X at TJ DeSantis, Instagram as well at TJ DeSantis. I think next week we're going to try to fit in a ground control, the return of Brandon McCatherine, myself, Claudia Gadelia, talking about all things on the floor when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and no-gi grappling. PGF, they're popping off doing big things. We got a brand new PGF Season 6 countdown available for you right now on the UFC Fight Pass YouTube. So check that out. If you don't know what PGF is, BMAX says it's everything about sports plus jiu-jitsu, and it truly is that. It is a 1 week long season that leads up to an EBI-style playoff, and it's the only combat sport I've ever really seen done a season correctly, but also the team concept, PGF World, bringing you jiu-jitsu in a way that you've never really seen before, and bringing you combat sports in a way that you've never seen before, done right when it comes to team-based fisticuffs. Can you still call grappling fisticuffs? Well, I just did. We're going to go with it. Get at me on Twitter if you're mad, or X, whatever it is, at TJ DeSantis. I want to thank Dean Thomas for coming on the air, breaking things down, going back to last week's UFC Fight Night card. Again, tomorrow's UFC Fight Night card, Allen versus Curtis 2, and then the monumental UFC 300 card, which is headed your way next Saturday night inside T-Mobile Arena. All right, that's it for us. For Dean Thomas, I'm TJ DeSantis. Thanks for going a few extra rounds right here on UFC Fight Pass.